Hello, and welcome to Day by Day True Crime Stories, the podcast where we explore a different crime or justice milestone from this day in history. I'm your host, Kona Gallagher, and today is September 11th. Today, we're revisiting a day that's forever seared into our global memory. September 11th, 2001. It started as an ordinary Tuesday and quickly unraveled into the deadliest terrorist attack in U.S. history. 4 commercial airliners were hijacked, landmark buildings fell, nearly 3,000 people were killed, and the world as we know it changed in a heartbeat. Today, we're talking about September 11th. Let's get started. Just after dawn on the East Coast, September 11th felt routine. Commuters were crossing bridges, coffee lines snaked around corners, and planes pushed back from gates. I had just arrived at my college job at the Office of Residence Life on campus, but at 8:46 a.m., our normal day ended. American Airlines Flight 11, a Boston-Los Angeles flight, was hijacked shortly after takeoff. At approximately 8:46 and 40 seconds, it slammed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center between the 93rd and 99th floors. Fire and debris filled the clear blue sky. Everyone on board died instantly, as did many in the building. New Yorkers stood frozen on sidewalks, looking up at an open wound downtown. 17 minutes later, as news cameras trained on the smoking North Tower, United Airlines Flight 175 came into view. At 9:03 a.m., it struck the South Tower between the 77th and 85th floors, live on television. Those of us who had turned on the news by that point didn't really understand what was happening. We thought it had been an accident. But once the second plane hit, we knew. This was no accident. The 2 tallest buildings in the Manhattan skyline were burning. Then, at 9:37 a.m., a third hijacked jet, American Airlines Flight 77 out of Dulles, crashed into the western side of the Pentagon. A low, roaring impact, a fireball, and then black smoke curling up from the headquarters of the U.S. military. Inside, hallways disappeared into flame and rubble. Outside, first responders ran toward the heat. United Airlines Flight 93 took off from Newark and was bound for San Francisco. When passengers understood through phone calls what was happening elsewhere, they made the choice to fight back. Their struggle with the hijackers surged into the cockpit, and at 10:03 a.m., the plane crashed into a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, missing its likely target in Washington. Everyone on board died, but their resistance likely saved countless lives on the ground. Back in New York, inside the towers, firefighters climbed stairs with 60 to 80 pounds of gear while office workers helped strangers down smoke-darkened stairwells. People called spouses, parents, and children to say "I love you" or "I'm okay," even when they weren't. The morning became a collage of courage and confusion, sirens and ash. By 9:59 a.m., just 56 minutes after being hit, the South Tower collapsed. The building's steel frame, heated and weakened by jet fuel-fed fires, gave way, pushing out billows of dust that swallowed streets, cars, people, and sunlight. At 10:28 a.m., after burning for 102 minutes, the North Tower also fell. 2 110-story giants were gone in less than half an hour. The radius of destruction stretched across lower Manhattan. Nearby World Trade Center buildings were gutted or crushed. 7 World Trade Center collapsed later that afternoon at 5:20 p.m. The human cost was staggering. Nearly 3,000 people were killed in the 4 coordinated attacks, the vast majority of whom were in New York City. Among the dead were office workers and restaurant staff, airplane crews and passengers, visitors from more than 90 countries, and a devastating number of first responders. 343 FDNY firefighters, 23 NYPD officers, and 37 members of the Port Authority Police. Some of the hardest hit companies lost hundreds of employees in minutes. Within minutes, the Federal Aviation Administration made an unprecedented decision. They grounded all civilian air traffic over U.S. airspace. Flights were diverted, airports closed, and the skies fell eerily silent. In New York and Washington, emergency operations centers surged into motion as firefighters, police, EMTs, and volunteers converged. The FBI launched Pent Bomb, the largest criminal investigation in its history. Fighter jets took to the air over major cities. Government buildings were evacuated. Ordinary people lined up to donate blood, drop off food and boots at firehouses, and posted photos of the missing on hastily constructed bulletin boards and fences all over Manhattan. On September 12th, NATO invoked Article 5, its Mutual Defense Clause, for the first time, declaring that an attack on one member would be considered an attack on all. Weeks later, the United States began military operations against al-Qaeda and the Taliban in Afghanistan. In the months and years that followed, the U.S. remade its security and intelligence architecture. Congress passed the USA Patriot Act, broadening investigative authorities. The Department of Homeland Security was created in 2002, consolidating 22 agencies. Air travel also changed profoundly. We got federalized airport screening, also known as the TSA, reinforced cockpit doors, and new watchlist protocols. An independent 9/11 commission examined what went wrong and recommended reforms, including the creation of a Director of National Intelligence and the National Counterterrorism Center to connect the dots that had been missed. For many survivors and responders, the danger didn't end when the fires went out. Months of recovery work at the World Trade Center site exposed thousands to toxic dust and smoke. Over the decades, cancers, respiratory diseases, and other illnesses linked to that exposure have claimed additional lives. So many that within the FDNY alone, post 9/11 illness deaths now exceed the number of firefighters who died that day. Health programs and compensation funds, like those established by the James Zadroga Act, became lifelines and constant reminders that 9/11's damage is ongoing. Where the Twin Towers once stood, two reflecting pools now fall endlessly into their own centers. Bronze panels carry the names of every person killed in the 1993 and the 2001 attacks. The 9/11 Memorial Museum holds twisted steel, missing persons flyers, voicemail messages, and stories of heroism and heartbreak. Nearby, the Memorial Glade honors those sickened or lost because they returned to help. The 9/11 Museum didn't open until 2014, though. For years, the ground where the towers once stood was simply a giant crater. I used to work in the financial district years after 9/11, and the train I took to the office went through the hole every morning. It took a long time for the scars to physically heal in downtown Manhattan, and even now, nearly a quarter of a century later, the emotional ones are still there. Across the country, other memorials, from the Pentagon's benches aligned with victims' birth years to the Flight 93 National Memorial's Tower of Voices, marked the place where lives were taken and bravery was shown. September 11th was more than an attack, it was a rupture in time. In a single morning, the sense of what was safe and what was possible shifted. Yet, alongside terror, we saw extraordinary courage. First responders running up as others fled down, passengers deciding to fight, and neighbors becoming lifelines. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Day by Day True Crime Stories. If you found this episode compelling, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It'll help us grow. And be sure to join me again tomorrow as we explore another significant event in true crime history. Until then, stay safe and remember that behind every headline is a life worth remembering. Day by Day True Crime Stories is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!